we are back. Refracted Notions podcast. This is going to be the fifth podcast that we make, and we're going to be touching up on a current subject. It's kind of a big one. It's something that all of us want to take serious and give it the proper seriousness that it deserves. Right now, there's a conflict that's been going on for a long time, and of course, I'm referring to the Israel-Palestine conflict. Many of the lives have been lost throughout the years. The history has been very violent in that region from many sides, many groups, and we're going to try to touch up on it a little bit and kind of get into it in the history. And I'm currently doing some research on it. I'm trying to formulate a PowerPoint presentation to hopefully in the future, once I'm done with it, I can turn it into a educational YouTube video that people can go to, look at it, and use it as a reference of the timeline of the history and how we got to this point. Maudie, you want anything you want to say before I get started on just my little summary of what I've learned and what I've in the whole journey of this learning experience and where I'm at. Before I get into that, any comments from Maudie or Joseph?
Yeah, I mean, we're stepping right, I think, into the belly of the beast. I think this conflict in particular is divisive, but also, because there's people from both sides of the spectrum kind of arguing one side or the other side. So this one is, I think, one topic where we needed to take our time and just kind of do a lot of internal research. I know Damien has been the one that's probably gotten educated a lot more on the historical aspect of how the conflict came to be, and the different aggressions that both sides have committed against each other, and where we stand right now. And so Joe and I, or at least on my side, I've stayed current on what is happening in terms of the airstrikes happening from one side, or maybe the involvement from different countries into this particular war. But I think this is a time to sort of share our ideas and extend the invitation to other people to kind of reflect about what is going on in the world, because at the end of the day, sometimes it might feel like this doesn't concern me or Joe or Damien, but it is about our planet, our history as humans. And I think it's good to sometimes take a minute or maybe longer to reflect on it and to agree, disagree. But yeah, it's definitely something that we're a little weary to step into. But hey, it wouldn't be interesting if it wasn't that. So yeah.
I think we're a little bit more than wary about stepping into it. It's a topic that it's a kind of like a career ender in some cases. People have been fighting. No, this is really going on. This is the people. Some celebrities and people who voice their opinions have been fired. For being either pro one side or the other. And I just want to enforce right now that we are trying to stay as neutral as possible. We're not trying to pick a side. There have been groups in both parties or in other parties that have done some wrongdoing, but that's not to say that we're picking a side. We're just trying to tell it how it is and kind of give it our opinion overall. But without really signing, I'm not here to side and wave one flag over the other. There were different times and periods, and something that needs to be pointed out is throughout the history there have been different groups. With Israel, there have been many groups that have formulated over time. The same thing with the Palestinian side and the Arab nations around. There have been groups that have come out of the conflict, and other groups that have used fruition out of a nationalist movement or a religious movement. And so these are all different movements with different agendas. And so each group has its play in history of the whole conflict. And we cannot hold one group. We can't hold all the people in that region, accountable for the actions of a certain group. even in some cases that may be that could be reasonable to assume. When the whole nation maybe backs up a certain group, or and in terms of like percentage wise. But I think in most cases we should you should try to stick to knowing what group was responsible for certain actions, and just hold that group accountable for it, and not look at them as like the whole of the nation, or the whole all the inhabitants of that region.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and there's also there's no justification for any type of like murderous aggression or terrorist attack or from it's hard to say, okay, who's the terrorist. I mean, it's not hard to say. See, now I'm getting tripped up, but there is no justification for the loss of human life, is what. And then
Well,
the other.
I will disagree with that. And there is justification in some cases, but okay, sorry to cut you off on that. Go ahead. My bad. I'm rude.
No, and also this is one of these like extreme.
Justification without any context.
Right now
you're
at the
gonna get
5-minute mark. No, but also this is such a layered, at least from my perspective, such a layered conflict. And people have been trying to fix this this tension for the longest. Bill Clinton tried in the 90s. I'm sure somewhere along the 1960s, they were trying to fix it. Even going back to like 1945 or the 1940s, when during the creation of Israel. So I mean, there's so many moving parts to this, and I think sometimes we talk about like the U.S. involvement, and the U.S. has been trying to get involved in this. This is just a little introduction into what like we might venture into, but we have had many people look at this topic, and none of them have been able to resolve it. And so because of this like increased tension, now we have this flare of war for unresolved political, maybe religious, maybe cultural tension that has bubbled up into this sort of now bigger thing.
Well, Marty, let me go ahead and just take the bullet for all of us, and I'll jump right into it, and
okay.
tell you where I stand and what I've learned so far, and I'll take the bullet for you guys, so you guys don't have to. So
because Marty has a good point that I was just kind of curious about. The unresolved problem. It seems like you've done a lot of research about that. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you could probably definitely give us some insight on why it's really difficult, and what are the main factors? Because Marty brought up a few different reasons, but maybe there's another reason that we're just unaware of, which makes it even more complicated.
Well,
but before we go on a little bit more, I wanted to say one last thing too. I kind of want to also talk about the fact that like it kind of like in the beginning, it kind of sucks that anyone who talks about or gives their opinion, they get canceled and all that stuff and career ending. Man, that's just a bunch of bullshit. You know what I mean? It's just I hate that. Like I want to bring up something because like I just kind of read the other day on CNN and Fox about like a cartoon on the Washington Post that they recently took down, and that would kind of be an interesting point. And it's just like, man, everyone's just kind of learning and stuff like that, and there's no reason for these extreme behaviors on things. I don't know. It's just the whole point of getting canceled and stuff like that. It's just ridiculous at this point, and people not sticking to what they say too, because out of fear of that. But continue, Damien.
All right, so I'm not gonna be well structured in this or go through a chronological order. I'm just gonna go wherever I think I should be at. But coming into this experience of trying to like learn as much as I can, which this is unfinished research. I'm almost towards the end of it, but I think I've gotten enough to where I can speak with some confidence about what I've learned. So there's a lot of things that the media doesn't cover, and it's like the recent history. There's some wars that I've never heard of, I was just mentioning this earlier with you guys, like the Suez Canal, war in 1956, the Lebanon War in 1982, the first, second, third, fourth, Arab-Israel war. And some of these are mentioned, but they're kind of cherry-picked and they're touched on very vaguely and short. And so there's so much information within every aspect of this conflict that's not touched on, and the whatever, depending on what side the media or a group of people are on, they tend to cherry pick and be very biased. And I found so much information that can, that from both sides that did wrong, or that explain why something occurred that I've never heard of. And so even with Ben Shapiro's quick explanation, the history, there's so much that was like missed, that it was too short. Whatever long 50 minutes or 30 minutes with his little short presentation was very skewed to his views, and he was interjecting information that I've learned that isn't even confirmed, that's it's kind of like hearsay. One thing that he said was that that the name Palestine was developed, which is accurate. It was made by the Romans when they took over Jerusalem. And this is like the second war after the second destruction of the temple. They named a certain region in Israel. They named it Israel-Palestina, and but his reference, his belief is that the name was made as a form of like disrespect towards the Jews. That's not the case. It was not, and there's no real evidence to back that up. Yeah, go ahead, Marty.
I wanted to this time be proper and like actually do like a raise my hand kind of thing. So for the people listening,
I saw it.
But the temple you're talking about, Solomon's temple, which is a sacred site for the Jewish people, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
This is the second temple that was destroyed. It was Heron's temple, also referred to that, and it was destroyed by the Romans. So the history is, so let's go to the history here aspect. So as far back as I have found written evidence of Jewish people being in a certain region of Jerusalem was as far back as 2,000 years ago, BCE. So before Common Era. And the way that people got there is, it's not really well known. You want to go with the biblical reasoning with, Moses freeing the people from Egypt and then going over there and trying to look for the promised land. You can believe that. I'm not here to say that was true or not. But yes, so this is the first time in history that we have writing evidence that there is a group of people, and these people are from the Jewish faith. So going forward, you have this land that's been fought over for many years, and many empires have come to fight over it. You have Cyrus, Cyrus the Great, that fought over the region. He took it from the Babylonian king, from the Babylonian kingdom, and he was able to free the people, the Jewish people, in a way, and letting them live there and go back to Jerusalem when the Babylon king had banished them and kicked them out and took them captive to Babylon. You have the Romans that took over, and they, there were civil wars within that empire. Then after that, you have it was just a constant fight over this land. But one thing that really stands out to me is that every empire has fought for this land and has conquered it through murder and through violence and force. And there were some empires that they're like Cyrus the Great, the Jewish people and many people of different faiths, they really liked Cyrus the Great. He was in history, he was known as being one of the most fairest for allowing the people to live there and to follow whatever the faith they wanted. I mean, the Jews have him in the Torah, have him written down in the Torah, or in the Jewish scriptures. They have him down as being anointed by God. That's how fair, or how much they looked up to him for that. So you have these different empires that, take over, and they rule however they want.
Yeah.
So that's
And
one thing. And go ahead.
and maybe this is why, and I'm glad that you've done the research, because that sort of makes me kind of like start asking questions, and also kind of like, take that all in, and like, spew it back out in the way I reason with it. But maybe that's why it's such an maybe interesting is the wrong word, but this is a place that has seen it has been infused with so many cultures, so much history, so many religions. It's curious that this area is intersects with all three main religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam.
That's a great point that you bring that up, because this area is the birth of like all those religions, and the one that occurred first, I mean, is based on the Bible and the New Testament and the Jewish Torah and their scriptures, and also the Quran. They kind of all stem from the same area, and they all basically stem from, so far from what I gathered, is from the Jewish religion, which is, it's like the Torah is kind of like the first book, and then you have the New Testament, which that most Christians go based off of, and that's kind of like the next book in the Torah, and then after that you have the Quran, because if you look at the Quran, the Quran was made from the Prophet Muhammad. Supposedly, the angel Gabriel, the angel, came down to the Muhammad when he was in a cave, like at the age of 40, I believe, and this is around 600 something, CE, Common Era, and his teaching, the Muhammad was a prophet who had gotten the Quran from the angel, and he had basically he's basically teaching the words of like Abram, Adam, Jesus, and Moses. These are very important figures in the Torah and then also in the New Testament. Jesus obviously being the main character for Christians, and everybody else for Abraham and Moses being the most important ones for the Torah. And so this is where these religions connect, and also where they kind of bifurcate, where they get separated. And then from each group, of course, then you have over time the stemming of like new, or the division of new ideas, and like ultra Orthodox Jews. So there's certain groups in there, and then you have the modern Orthodox Jews and different groups there. The same thing with Christians, and Muslims. You have the Shia, the Sunni. It's very complicated, and over time, it's just like these groups just start growing out of those ideologies.
Yeah, and it's also this funny interconnection, or this weaving of religious ideas into like political activism. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the I guess the justification for like this is our land, that kind of thing, from both sides, because it just stems from the books, from the Abrahamic Islam side, and then the Moses kind of like claim or story of leading the Jewish people to the promised land. So it's like on both sides, it could seem as though they are justified for their claims, because
Right.
it comes from this like deep religious ideology or story that they've been told, and that we've all been told, and that we all believe for that reason.
Right. Joseph,
yeah.
I see you got your hand up.
Oh yeah, I got my hand up. Yeah, another thing I just kind of want to add too, and maybe you can kind of enlighten us a little bit more about that, is that this region just so happens to also be the spot for some holy sites for the Jewish and Muslim faith. Some very important holy sites in this region, right?
Yeah, so Jerusalem is the main one. You have the Mount Zion, or where they have their important temples. You also have a site where the Prophet Muhammad was buried, and Christians also have holy sites there that they these are places that you have a lot of pilgrimage that come over there for religious reasonings, or tourists that go and visit these religious sites. And these sites are very important to all three groups, but it's mainly a battle between, the Muslim and Jewish communities for these sites. There's just a disagreement on who should own what region, and so that's a little different.
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to say that I'm well versed on the religious side, just so you guys know. And
Yeah, the handling of the religious sites and stuff like that, that has in your timeline that you've been researched, that has been a point of conflict,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Especially one of them.
yeah,
That there's been something there that's been important in more
yeah.
recent history, correct?
Right. Correct. Yeah, because
Okay.
the Torah, the Bible, and the Quran touch on these sites, and so these are part of the teachings also. And historically, I mean, it's just there's so much significance, and you have like the birth of the Muhammad. You have the Moses with the crossing the Dead Sea and going to the Promised Land with his followers and so on. In history, you have you have so many wars that try to take over. Even with Christians, the Crusaders, they went and they massacred and killed people, and they fought over Jerusalem like 3 times. It was like the one for the first crusade, the second crusade that didn't do much, the third crusade that they finally had a little bit of dominance. But and their mission was to take control of Jerusalem. For them, as Christians, that was like a very important like kingdom and area for them to control.
Yeah.
But anyways, moving on from what I said earlier about the empire. So you have all these different empires that have been taken over, and it's just like one empire over the other, with Alexander the Great. And just so you know the history of these empires that took over the areas, they're so fascinating. There's so much that is interesting to learn, especially with Alexander the Great, how and within 10 years, the span of 10 years, from the moment his dad died and he took control at the age of 20, he was able to just conquer a whole area. He was going from, conquering, village after village, empire after empire, and going through it, with a hard fist and direct force, using his army and his weapons and tactics that they employ with the weapons and the shields, and the way they skillfully place certain groups of their military, of their army, and you just kind of just plowing through every empire and just having full dominance. Unfortunately, that left a lot of unstable areas behind that they dominated, and over time, after his death, it pretty much quickly dissolved. But that's another interesting empire that took over. But like I said, it's mainly been a history of empires taking control over the region, and with the last main ones being the Ottoman Empire and the British Empire. These are the most recent important ones that have left us to where we are right now. And
Yeah.
Marty, you have a question?
Yeah, well, no, I just wanted to maybe ask, or maybe kind of bring out to light the reason why this area has been conquered for the longest time, or at least throughout history. And my reasoning is because it is a key kind of like area of transport, perhaps like, the Suez Canal kind of like being this sort of area where you can connect to, obviously Asia, but also to Africa, to, all those regions. So this particular point or place in the world is so important, and not just for religious aspects, but also because of trade. Perhaps maybe like, Alexander the Great wanted to conquer this area because it was like, a point of transport.
Yeah, I see the point you're making, but I'm not too sure on like the geographical importance. I know that it is important, and life was able to flourish there, and it is surrounded by some bodies of water and canals, but I'm not sure exactly how much that played a role. I think what played a role mostly is yes, that it is kind of like fertile land there, and that's fought over later in years. But I think it's more the religious aspect that was fought over historically, and then later on it just turned into control and empires trying to take over.
Mm.
Because you can say the same thing about other regions around there that, empires were able to grow and sustain people, a civilization for years. Like the Ottoman Empire wasn't just, it was, for a long time from like 1516, I believe, I'm not sure if I'm getting that right, all the way to 1917 to its demise. It was able to sustain an empire for so long. And, people of different faiths were able to live there, albeit not, as first class citizens, but they were able to live there for a long time. So, and that's a big region, and it's not Israel right now, and that area is just right now to this day is Israel's flourishing in terms of like how they're able to sustain a modern city and how rapidly they're growing. But other regions around there are also growing rapidly, and so in terms of geographically speaking, yes, it is a great spot, but I'm not sure how that played a real important role over the course of the history and why it was fought over. I think it was fought over more for the religious aspect, and then later on, is people, establishing that place as their home, and now two groups of people, or two group of nationalistic viewing groups fight over it in terms of like that being their home.
Yeah, well, and also I think from my very short, concise research that I did on it, this is definitely less than some of the work that you put in, Damien. But a lot of what is being said on, at least on platforms, educational videos, Vox, for example, or Crash Course or something like that. And I'm mentioning them only because these are very available and maybe they're a place to start learning about this history. But a lot of what is said in those videos, or at least the early introduction to it, is that these cultures, I guess, lived in peace, or at least exchanged.
You see, when those are some conjectures, I believe, that are presented, and kind of part of like what I mentioned earlier about how somebody is cherry picked or some size cherry picked. Yeah, it's just this issue is not as simplistic as that. Where you could say that under an empire, under the Ottoman Empire, when I was doing my research, I learned that many times the first things you hear is like, yeah, there were Muslims and Christians living there, and they were living amongst each other. And so you think in your mind, oh, it was a peace. It was great. It was good for everybody. No, not really. There were still civil wars or civil fights going on. And under the Ottoman Empire, anybody who wasn't Muslim was considered a second-class citizen. And, you have the Umar Pact, whenever the caliphates, when they took over the Ottoman Empire, or whenever they took over before the Ottoman Empire, they were pretty much it was a pact that was made with people who were not Muslims. So instead of just kicking them out or killing them, they decided to make a pact, and so they lived amongst each other. It was at the time, it was the most fair kind of approach, but they were still kind of discriminated against, like Jews. The history of the Jews is it's funny how they have been killed and massacred for a long time and pushed out of the land. I'm not going to say their land. I'm not going to say whose land it is. Don't want to say that. But they were pushed out, killed, exiled, brought back. They fought to go back, and so in their history, they faced, and this is why the word anti-Semitism is such a big word and holds so much value in history, because they've been hated on and killed, for being Jews and throughout history, and so. Yeah, going back to what you were saying of how they were living in peace. Yeah, there could have been neighbors that were at peace with each other, but there was conflict, and there was a lot of scapegoating going around, and Jews maybe attacking some of their neighbors for whatever reason, because they disagree, or Jews' perspective, or like a Muslim perspective disagreeing with their neighbor, their Jewish neighbor, or a group of them, and also. Towards the end of at the beginning of the Ottoman Empire, the economy was doing pretty good, and towards the end, as the empire starts to crumble and the economy is going bad, now there's like the groups there, or the people living in that area, and the people in power blaming the Jewish people for the downfall of the economy, and so they're leaving the area, and so it's not like it was perfect. It might have been better than before under some empires, but it wasn't really. I mean, the history there has never been beautiful. It's never been peachy. It's always been, maybe a time of peace for like 10 years, or no wars going on for like a year. But there's always been that tension. You have two groups of people, and you have multiple groups now, but it's always been like, like them versus us versus them kind of conflict throughout the history.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry. What was your point before I just cut you off on that thing, on that everyone living together?
Well, I mean, my point was this sort of simplified way of looking at the history between these two parties or religious sides. I mean, we only have to look at another example in history, which is, the Irish division, or the Irish conflict. I think, the Protestant and the Catholics over there in that side, very, very, well, I don't want to, step off or say something that is wrong on that side too and get canceled by the Irish. But these are two Christian religions that still found some conflict. So you can imagine that side being a warring kind of damn, I lost the word. But these are two sides that are warring against each other, and they're so close in terms of their religious nature. And now we have, on this side, we have two completely different religions, so that side gets even more
and the funny part is that these kinds of conflicts are, besides I think that thing that makes the Israel and Palestine conflict so much more greater when it comes to fighting is because of the Arab and Israeli nationalist kind of like mentality. So that you have the religious backing, and not even necessarily all the time, because it could be a secular backing, but it's this nationalist kind of mentality is what kind of like creates this even tension, even makes it greater, because you have conflicts like this all over the Arab world, and in other countries, in other parts of the world as well. Like with Muslims, you have different groups like the Sunni and the Shia, and there have been conflicts between them, and in Pakistan, and all over the region. Even with different groups within a nation, kind of like the PLO. They started off with and a group stem out of them that eventually turned into like the enemy. And the Syrians, they helped them in the Lebanon war, but towards the end they were like going against them. They became enemies. So it's like these different groups, and that because they have a different belief, or they see for whatever reason, militarist, because of the military, they have different military tactics as they use. Maybe it's viewed by another group as too of a terrorist approach. And so there's just too many details with that. But Joseph, I see your hands up. What's up?
No, I had my hand up because I saw that your camera went off, but then I think it was just a problem with my connection. I just wanted to let you know.
100% your connection, because mine's still running. But if it did go off, damn, that sucks. Well, we're good.
Yeah, you're good. It was my connection, because Maudi's also went off, and then everything froze.
Oh, then 100% you. 100%.
Yeah, it's 100%. I changed the Wi-Fi.
So going back to what I was saying about the empire. So as I learned about these empires taking over this area for so many years, you have the last two, which are the most important ones in today's topic, which is the Ottoman Empire, of course, that took over. And this is before that. It was like, okay, so let's bring up that point too. So Muhammad comes into play later on, and he was born in like 500 something BCE. BC. Oh, I'm sorry. No. I'm sorry. C. Yeah. I get confused with them. Common Era, and what's BC again? Before Common Era. Yeah. So before Common Era, and so C. So C would be during our time that we 600
Then this could be a little
1400
stupid,
years ago. Yeah.
but I know that they BCE. I think they changed it. Didn't they change it? Because it was
Yeah,
like
this is politically
Christ.
correct because before we used to use like AD, after Christ's death, and before Christ. BC used to be like before Christ. So,
Right.
but now
So
I rather use BC and CE because it's just secular, and I'm more of the facts kind of guy.
yeah, no, I'm just talking about like this sort of like this injecture of or the infusion of like religion, even in our history, even in the way we kind of learn. Because you know what, it's whoever won, whoever took over. That's
Exactly.
the standard.
Exactly. And that's why we are where we are. But anyways, going back to so Muhammad comes into play right around 600 CE, and he died. Well, and as he's coming into, I guess, power, he has sort of like a military going on. You can say his followers. Well, anyways, his followers and his caliphates, which there's a division there between different Muslim groups that believe that who the caliphate that took over was the right one, and there's a group that believe that some others should have been the ones who, I guess, led the Muslim community. So then, even early on, you have that kind of like division. Well, anyways, this group of Muhammad followers, they have this military, and they take over the Jerusalem area. And, they take it from the Crusaders, and before that, some other group. I forget exactly. But anyways, this is when they come into play and they come into power. And they're able to sustain that power for a good long time, for over 400 years, I believe. And then they lose it to the Ottoman Empire. These are the Turks that come in here and they take over. So then they're the last empire to really be in control. That's from a group that's actually there, living there, because the empire afterwards is the British Empire. They're taking control, but in a different way. They're not there. The British have their own country, their own land that they're far away from. This is now, at this point, this is just the military going out to control. So it's a little bit different from the previous empires. This is like a new modern empire. And before every empire, things change. There was over time, empires became a little more civil, more diplomatic, trying to govern the people, have control over more structured. Civilizations have improved. These empires have come a long way from like the Babylonians that probably murdered and killed people, and the Romans also, and the Crusaders definitely.
I think here we're talking like late 19th century, so 1880s, 90s or something.
With the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah. This is right before World War One.
Correct.
I think this is where you're going.
1917. So this is where I'm going with this. So, but just to make the point for later on, also, it's these empires. These previous empires have been taken over and controlling and dominating in a way that's different from the empires of today. And with the Crusaders being a prime example of how control was used, was took and with the iron fist and through murder, but that still didn't make them superior empire. They eventually fell because their medieval ways were just too hardcore for even the people in there. That that empire was just bound to fall. So you have the Ottoman Empire that takes over the Turks, and things are a little better for the Jewish people in the first half. And you have Jewish people starting to move back in. They're buying land there, and everything's working great for them. But towards the end, as the economy starts to break down, the empire starts to crumble. Anti-Semitism starts to grow, and this is kind of like, and at the end in 1917, when they finally get defeated they're in war with the British, because they're completely defeated. Like in 1920, when the British Mandate gets established, Jewish people are now being attacked, and there's in other areas that they're putting taxes on them. They're like killing them financially, like taxing like them at 100% or 200%. Then no one could really afford, and you cannot sustain a life like that. And so this is when you start seeing the migration of like Jews going to the United States, going to like parts of Europe, going to South parts of South Africa. Yeah, what's up, Marty? You have a question?
Okay, so yeah, I was sort of like kind of wondering about the timeline of the Jewish people leaving their homeland and going to places like you were saying, Europe, United States, and stuff. So they're leaving that area. I guess I'm supposing, or I'm uh, making sense that this was because of the anti-Semitic views
Yeah,
and
this is the anti-Semitism that starts to grow and it starts to kind of like fester, and it's fostered by the economy crumbling of the Ottoman Empire. So the blame, throughout history, politicians and people in power, and naturally groups of people, we want to like put the blame, and we want to have a reason why things are going, and so blaming like a group of people has always been kind of like the easiest thing to do and to kind of accept for many groups. And so there were this.
Is it because like I wanted to ask you this earlier on?
Yeah.
Like I mean, I don't know, just to try to understand why the blame is coming from there. It just so happens that a lot of the Jewish folks during the time they held, I guess, the type of jobs that were probably
this is a great question.
Part of that economy.
This is a great question because you're going to see that later on in Europe and especially Germany. You know what's coming from there. So you have there were doctors, there were lawyers, and they.
But
so,
whenever we're talking about bad economic turndowns, where usually people point to the people in finance. That I guess they held a lot of the financial jobs.
Right, and for whatever reason, because it's just for whatever reason, you can say that it has to do with their religion, their culture. It could be who XX.
They just needed someone to blame, a group to blame, so they just blamed them. Okay.
Yeah, and also, I mean, historically, like Jewish groups or communities, they tend to stick together. They speak Hebrew. They share the same language, heritage, and so they keep their money within, in their communities, and so that could be seen from outside groups, or as like, oh, they're they're living good and we're living bad. Who knows what the reasons were?
I never paid attention to the rhetoric,
that to me
and I've always been kind of curious. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Joe. I just wanted to kind of like.
I said I never really paid attention to the rhetoric at the time, like to see what was like published in the newspapers to justify it. You know what I mean? Because they were trying to spread things around, obviously, to get everyone on board. And that'd just be kind of just like, reviewing that to seeing what was said. That'd be kind of interesting at some point. I don't know if you did that.
Yeah, and inside the Ottoman Empire, so there's some great things there's a lot of great books that you can read, and people who dive more in depth of like how the civilizations were during that time. The one person I'm gonna bring out that he's great to follow and listen to for more details, and he has books out there. And both political parties use him as references. He's been used as a reference, throughout this conflict for many, many years. It's Benny Morris. You should definitely read his books or listen to his podcast. He goes into depth and he studied this, and he's actually I think he's Jewish. I think he's from Israel, but he's able to present and like dig up data that's like goes against the IDF. So he's very factual, and he's just trying to stick to the facts, even though you might think he's biased or not. It is worth at least hearing his research out, and like he goes into depth in some cases. Of course there's some details that both groups are going to go against, and there's going to be details that he like, or information that he's written about or spoken about that the either group can disagree with. So he's like, he's good. He's definitely going to be a person who has so much research that both groups can cherry pick from, basically. So but it's worth going to him as a source of information on this topic, definitely. But back to what I was
no, just to kind of, I guess, I don't know, add to what Joe was saying. That to me has been this like puzzle or riddle or just very mysterious kind of like why the anti-Semitic kind of stance and the constant blame on these people from multiple sides. Obviously we're talking now about the exodus during the Ottoman era.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't really call it an exodus. There were still Jews who stayed behind, and and you still have a lot of, even though you don't have as many Jews in some of these Arab world or countries, you still have some communities here and there. Um, but I wouldn't really call it a mass exodus. I would just call it like a natural occurrence that
Migration.
when people are being blamed for or attacked, and the economy's not doing too good, you will naturally want to move to a place where the economy is better for you. You're not being prosecuted, and so that's why you have high numbers of Jewish people that left these areas to go to in 1948 to Israel. Before that to America, Europe, and then South Africa.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like a normal thing that would occur under those kind of circumstances. But the anti-Semitism, like again, it just stems from, I guess, political powers or people in power at the time trying to point fingers at why it had happened. But I will say that Ottoman Empire towards the end, because their empire was crumbling. The leader at the time, I forgot his full name. There's so many people to keep track of that. There's gonna be names I forget and I butcher. But the leader at the time, he tried to remedy the situation and prevent Jewish people from leaving, because them leaving also further degrades the economy, and by taking away the dhimmi status, which is basically kind of like what was the Pact of Umar, how it kind of initially started, which is like having them as second-class citizens. So by taking that off, the leader at the time, he wanted to make it seem like it was fair, and like he was trying to get rid of this a second-class citizen view towards the Israeli, or the not Israelis, but Jews at the time, because there's no such thing as really Israeli at the time.
I have
Right.
a question.
Until
It's more
1948.
it's more modern history. But are the Palestinians today, from your research, you kind of treated as second-class citizens?
So I haven't really gone there yet. I don't want to touch too much on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to be like as accurate as I can, because yes, I know you're referring to like Gaza and the West Bank and how they're, and like, or inside of Israel, how they're treated. I'll get into that later on with my research, but I don't want to get too much into that yet. I'm not confident to talk on that, because that's the hottest part. That's like the hottest plate, the hottest part of the plate to touch right now. So I wanna,
You're talking about second class. I was just wondering if there's any analogs to
No,
today's.
no, and that was also sort of my kind of, because we're venturing into the Jewish kind of like history and like background and context and all of that. But there's also the, as Joe is saying, the Palestinian side, and so because there's both sides here, right? So there's what is
yes.
happening.
Oh,
What is
here,
happening with
you
them
guys are
too.
you guys are trying to jump ahead here. So here, let me go back to where it was. So you have these. So this is towards the end of the Ottoman Empire, right? It starts to crumble. They start to kind of leave out, and so now you have, Jews in like Germany and United States, and they're so 1917, the British Empire comes over, takes over, controls it, and so they're the new empire. So it used to be the Turks. Now they're the new empire taking control over the area. But they take control over the area, but not just put them by themselves. They take over with France. And so they have this Sky Picket agreement between them in like
Um,
1916, I believe. These I'm gonna maybe butcher the names, but so you have that, and that's a new empire that's taken over, right? Here, one second. Let me go over. I got some notes here to kind of keep me, a little more accurate and not just saying stuff. I'm gonna get to it right now. There it is. So you have the Sky Picket Agreement in 1916. Yeah, between them, that they're gonna take control. That they're gonna pretty much share or like or have their control of whatever regions they want. So they agree. Okay, friends, you're gonna have this region, past the Transjordan area, and I'm gonna have Palestine, and I'm gonna have Transjordan. You're gonna control this area. And so also going on, there's so much in here in this little timeline. There's so much that occurred. So the British come take over, right? and you have Jews in Europe and mainly and in Russia also, and they're being prosecuted and they're being or attacked, and they're anti-Semitism is growing. So what happens a little before that? In 1960 to 1904, you have Theodor Hertz, right? He's born in a time, and he's in Germany. He's born in a time where there's this anti-Semitism kind of like all around him, and so he grows into this. So it would be natural that out of this environment, one person has to grow up and say, "This is not good. This is not right. This is not fair. I want better." So it was him. He was the main one because in 1896 he writes the pamphlet Der Judenstaat, which means the Jewish state. This is where the Zionist movement really gets its momentum. You have all this anti-Semitism. There have been, and historically for them, they've been pushed out of their land. And he's secular, and he has a Zionistic approach or a movement going on that he is secular about. He's not really interested in the religious aspect, and he gets this movement going on all around the world. And this movement over time gets so much momentum and such support from followers that they're able to force the British to as they're conquering the land in that area, they're able to also lobby their politicians. Also, the United States lobbyist groups are able to push, and so there's this huge force pushing on the British to help out in a time where they're being attacked.
I think. And this is sort of where I kind of start to gain a little bit more awareness of the conflict around the British takeover. But around the British takeover, obviously there's this Zionist, as you were saying, the beginning of the Zionist movement. And this is a time when the Jewish people are being oppressed, have been oppressed to the point where they've become this sort of guerrilla-ish kind of group, if I'm not mistaken. Where
so you have different groups that kind of stem off of this movement where they're fighting for these groups that come out because they're being attacked and they're trying to fight back and they want to pressure to get into back to their homeland.
Yeah,
so to speak.
I think this is a common parallel for oppression and radicalism, at least in the way I'm seeing it. But what was the other thing I wanted to say? Okay, keep going, Damien, because I lost my train of thought. But
okay, so you have this Zionist movement, right? That's really gotten a lot of momentum, but it's not even at its peak yet. That's later on. This is just kind of like the beginning but it's growing fast. It's the Zionist movement is just wildfire, catches on like wildfire.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they're able to pressure the British to kind of also give them this, which is in 1917, to kind of give them some land. So the British say, okay, they make an agreement with them in 1917. They say, we'll give you a Jewish nation home inside of Palestine. But it's a little before that, between 1915 and 1916, you have the McMahon Hussein correspondence, and these are letters back and forth between the British and the Arabic people in that region.
Yeah, this is the double play here where I think the British were giving it to the French, here you go, have this land. But in the meantime, they're negotiating with the Palestinian people, and this is around the time when the Palestinian people they were trying to create an identity, and so I think there was this is probably in the letters, but this negotiation between the British, the French, and the Palestinian group, and also because I think the British were supporting the Palestinian people to defeat the Jewish insurrections.
Yes. I'm sorry. What was that question again? The last one. The insurrectionists, the Jewish insurrectionists.
There were some. I don't want to step too into it, but I think this is the time where there was some Jewish radical groups that were attacking the Palestinian people.
Well, that's a little later. That's not yet.
Is that a little later? Okay, never mind then. But I know
Yeah,
that the
you're
British,
talking about like the Aragon, the Haganah, and the Lehi, something like that. Is that what
yeah,
you're referring to? Those kind of groups? Yeah, those are military groups that kind of come out of the conflict in Israel and Palestine. So that's a little later. But I believe there are Aragon groups in Britain. This is some history. I'll put that down. When were they actually were established? Because that's once I'm done with my full research for the PowerPoint and present on YouTube, I'm gonna get all that. So
yeah. No, I understood that the British were supporting, or at least claiming to support, the birth of a Palestinian.
yeah, so yeah, there are groups that kind of like pressured the British and later. So the terrorists and the insurgencies that occurs later on. This is ones Palestine has, because right now they're kind of like lobbying and pressuring them to get like give them their homeland or give them like a place to go to move into. So that's like in 1917 where they come with that agreement, right? And then at the same time you have them make an agreement with the people there in Palestine. And the reason why they do that is because they want the Arab people there to help them fight off the Ottoman. They said, "Here, help us out, and we'll give you a piece of land, and you'll be secured." So of course, any group or any Arab nationalist group will be like, "Hell yeah, we're gonna fight for you. We're gonna help you, and so you can give us our land." And so in their mind, they're thinking, "Oh, this is gonna benefit us." But the French are doing it just to help them out. It's just a tactical strategy as an empire to win and dominate over a region, because the real the real agreement isn't within for these groups. The real agreement is between France and them taking control over the region. This is why it's called the Palestine Mandate. It's not called it's not really called like just Palestine. This is an empire that has just taken over control of a region in a different form with the military, and is trying to control that region, and they pretty much dominate. They're the new empire in town. They're the new big kid, the bully in town.
But the thing is, it's this is the sneaky kind of double play from the British, because I think that the Palestinian people were led to believe that they were going to govern themselves, and I think that's sort of what the British were saying, like, "Hey, we're
Right,
just here. We'll let you do your business. You guys,
right.
like, govern
Well,
yourselves."
the
Sort of.
thing is that they bit off more than they can chew, and they later figure that out. That's why that created the Peel Commission. So, in terms of like buying off more, they can chew at the time. Yes, that's what happened. They did these promises, and these with that, once they played them out together, it didn't quite work out. So it's like promising two groups the same land, and once you put them together, it's like, okay, let me try to govern this as much as I can. But there's tension and conflict because of the two groups fighting for the land that was promised. So for them, it's different. So that turns into turmoil, and they're trying to figure out later on, and like with the Peel Commission that was established later on, like why are these conflicts here? And so they figure out, okay, it's because two groups want the same land that we promised them. And so then that's when the partition plan comes into play, and they try to implement it, and then that nobody in that group likes it. The Arabs or the Palestinians especially were not in favor for that. So naturally they're going to be like, this is what we're here for. And at the time their numbers were greater. So if you're going to partition the land in half, they see it as unfair because they have a higher population, so they should get more, and they were there first. So
And
they see that it's natural for them to see it like that. And also dividing the land just in a half is not even something that you can easily do, because you have to look at like, okay, how fertile is the land? Who's already has property there, or has houses, or has already paid for the land. So you have to look at all that. And so it's very complicated. It's not as easy. Okay, half and half.
divvying up the land, and you're a third party, you have no knowledge or reconnaissance of, like, the cultural, the historical aspect, all of that. The British just took over and bit more than they could chew. But I think, to me, this is the pivotal moment where things started to destabilize. The moment you have European powers or this nationalistic identities that are rising in the early 20th century, trying to take over land, to build their empires, and then destabilizing the place to a point where now we don't recognize who the hell this land is, because from my understanding, the British were not only negotiating with the French, but with the Palestinian, but also with the Italians, and they were like, "Oh, okay, well, we're just going to give it away, and we're just going to."
You see, this is the history that only that we are left to know, right? This is all that we know so far. This is why some people call this a project, because it's like, why would they do it like this? Why, first of all, they're not even taking full control for actual like empire dominance. They're not like even moving their people, like migrating their people in there. It kind of looks, if you look at, once you start learning about all this and you back up a little bit, this idea goes in my head, like, why such a great empire at the time? Why do they take over and they don't do like the other empires where they pretty much enforce their will? Because once an empire takes over, they have the control of the region. They have full control. The Crusaders, dominate their violence, and if you don't like the way we rule it, and you're not a Christian, guess what? Fucking chop your head off. The Romans were the same way. We're gonna govern you. We're in control. Our empire is better. We create a civilization with with our technology, our weapons. You're gonna thrive with us, but you gotta fall our way, or else you're gonna be murdered. You take it or fucking death. And so this is an empire that came out of nowhere, and they're in charge now, whether you like it or not. They fought over it, and they might have made an agreement with you, but once they say we're in charge, you want to follow, they took the approach of being more, I guess, over time, civil, humans, and everyone else became more civilized, more diplomatic, trying to negotiate and approach things in a more civil way. So this is just human evolution, but it made for a more complex scenario, because this is the British trying to negotiate or like establish two people and try to make them live together, but they couldn't do it. And so when you back up and look at it from a distance, you're like, why would they do it like that? If they wanted to, they could have just bombed the fuck out of everyone and killed everyone, or they could have just said, you know what, we made a deal with you, but we don't give a fuck. You're gonna fucking do what we say. And so it's like, I can't help but my mind goes to the path of like, wait, what is there where is there to really gain? Is it really that? Is it possible that maybe this is just a project for them to create a war between two groups, and like military, if military funding from both sides to see how weapons work out and who has the military? I mean, that's just that's a little conspiracy theory that I came up with. I was like, it's fascinating to kind of think of. That's definitely, I'm not saying that's even close to being true, but it's just like, it's kind of like my mind can't help but like wonder, is that maybe the secret that we don't know, that this is why it was built, so that we can just funnel all this money and military from every side to see how we can execute and like attack each other, and kind of like a little project. But anyways, back to what I was saying about like the empire. They could have dominated fully if they wanted to, but they approached it in a different way. And at the end, they kicked it to the UN to take over. Once the United Nations was established, they pretty much left, and they said, "Okay, you guys take over." And they also came with, and in 1948, once the British completely left, Israel was claimed and established, and they were attacked by all the Arab countries around them.
Well, and this is, I think, also it's good to highlight that the UN was established by Woodrow Wilson. So I mean, this is where I think the US starts to like fucking fall into the mix, because I think the UN at first was like 13 nations. I think it was like US, Britain, France. Well, I don't even remember who. Italy was also part of the UN, I think. Yeah, so it's around the time when people that shouldn't meddle in this land or are no party to this land,
well, I wouldn't say that the UN. I think this is the UN. This is the first UN task, really, the big assignment that they kind of you could say maybe that's why it was built. I don't know exactly why, but it's the first like big problem that the UN takes on. And so the British leave. I wouldn't say that the UN shouldn't be there, because with British pretty much with the British Empire pretty much creating this problem, and then he's leaving because it's like they don't want to deal with it anymore financially and whatnot. The UN is made at a good time where I think that it wasn't necessary, like, or organization. It was something necessary because you have two groups that are trying to kill each other, and it's the UN is kind of like been like a little buffer or like the mediator over time, and that's what the UN pretty much has done historically. When
Yeah.
even during agreements or agreements to ceasefire or like armistice, they've been the ones that kind of get in the middle and make sure, and they have observers that go and like make sure that the peace is still there and document
Yeah.
okay, who did what, who created this massacre here, who broke the agreement. So they're kind of like the mediators. It's a necessary force, I think, that was needed.
Yeah, the UN
But
was I'm sorry, the UN was made after World War II.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
too.
So let's backtrack to like
Oh wait, the League of
1920.
Nations. I think you're talking about the League of Nations.
No, the League of Nations was under the British mandate. That was the force, from different countries. That it's kind of like the UN, but it's what gave the British kind of like the power to create the mandate there. And
So what was it? What was started by Woodrow? Because I know there was something he started.
I don't know. That's something I didn't look into. Who established who or what under Woodrow with the UN or like the League of Nations. I know the League of Nations is like various nations that pretty much died off once the UN came into place.
Oh,
The UN
okay.
pretty much replaced the League of Nations.
This is good. I'm looking it up.
Yeah,
This is
he was responsible for the League of Nations, World War One.
yeah,
So
World
the
War
UN
One,
was after World War II,
and then
1945.
it earned Wilson the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah. Well, anyways, you have in 1917 the British go in there, and you have the Zionist movement that's growing, and so finally they convince them. And so now you have these mass migration movements to Israel. The Jewish people get their land. This is a big win for them under the British mandate. So this is a British once again the empire allowing this. They're in control of the region. They're allowing it, and so anyways, but at the same time, why is there such a big push for this movement? Because they've been killed off in many places historically. But this is where the bigger push. All this happens at the perfect, it's like the perfect storm. Because then what happens? You start to get the rise of the German Nazis, right? You have Adolf Hitler, his rise to power. And he's jailed, he's in jail for like I forgot, like a year or 10. I forgot how long exactly, but he's able to write like his famous book that finally got published like in 2000 and something recently, because they were publishing it and it was banned, and now it's being published again. But he writes there how why he pretty much like how he feels about the current situation, and he writes about his hate for the Jews. So he's got this book that's published, and he has his own movement and followers, and he's growing into power, and he's able to meddle his way to the Third Reich and become like the Führer. By playing.
We're jumping now
Yeah.
to World War II.
Yeah, World War II, right? 1944. So all this is, they have their state now, and the British mandate is already established, and they're trying to grow. But at the same time, you have in Germany this anti-Semitism going on, and it's growing, and he goes and meddles his way, and is able to like play this house of cards to where he gets to the top, and now he's loved by the whole nation, and he has a great following. And they've already lost World War I, 1917. So World War II, it's like there's this huge momentum of national movement that they want to win, and they're following Adolf, and they're under his wing basically. So he comes into power 1945. This is the all-time high of anti-Semitism in that region, and this hate is growing. It's not just stuck there. The people all around the world are reading about this, or learning, and so it starts to grow, and it's like a disease. This anti-Semitism is at the all-time high all around the world, and so 6 million Jews get killed, right? The United States say that we put our foot down, we go into war against them. Many other countries too, because we know this is not right. And so there's this, all of a sudden, the Jewish community all around the world has uh, this following that we're like, oh shit, there's so much support for them all over the world. So this is another driving force that kind of helped perpetuate this Israel state coming to fruition. And at the time, it was necessity, and it was right. It was right. I mean, they needed to get out. So in 1935, before the Nazis start killing off the Jews, there's the Nazi agreement with the Jews, the German Jews, to get them. So they were able to come to an agreement where they facilitated the migration of German Jews to Israel in 1935. And it was around, I think it was 600,000 Jews, or it was either 60,000 or 600,000. But that agreement was, like a pivotal moment for the German Jews to get to Israel, and a time when little was known that it was going to get too extreme, but time was ticking, and eventually, once the Fuhrer was in full control, you started getting these concentration camps and the killing of all these Jews. 6 million Jews.
Yes, I mean, that one of the most horrific acts in history. But I can also see this sudden influx, this sudden migration of all of these people that were unjustly killed and treated in this way. But they all go to this now, the return to this newly created state of Israel. And so, what is happening with all those people in Palestine that were already there, that were already kind of settled, that were already trying to create their own identity? Now they have this group of people that are coming in.
Well, here, right, and so just to fix something I said, it was 1933, the Habara Agreement, and it was 60,000 German Jews that migrated during that agreement. But yeah, so you have this huge, atrocity that happened in the world, and the whole world is tuning in, and the World War II happens. So there's all of a sudden, this rise of anti-Semitism now kind of flips, and now there's this huge support for them naturally. And so this is so loud of a historical moment that everything else is kind of like it's tuned out. It's just too loud to ignore, and it's so loud it overlaps everything else happening in like the Jewish world. And so it definitely made a great push for support to Jewish people, to Israel, and that support for that movement, and that for that nationalist movement and the Zionist movement, the the religious movement. And so that's what kind of facilitated and created that support, because later on you have money going there from the United States to help out with their military and whatnot. And so now when they start moving in, and there's that partition plan that only the Israelis took, and once they in 1948, once they established their independence, Israel was the only group of people, was the only side that pretty much agreed to it, because like I said, at the time, the Palestinians or the Arabs that were there, they had a higher population, and they didn't see it fair. They even liked that they were pushed. So it's just something that they're never gonna agree to it. And so because it's from the very beginning, they've been pushed out. And the occupation, if you want to look at it like that, or the settlements, or the new territories that they're getting into, has been happening since the day that the British allowed it, basically. And so it's just gonna, if you come in, and yes, I just want to say that the Jewish people at the time were by purchasing the land, and there were Arabs who owned the area, or whoever owned it, they were buying it from them. And let's say they purchase the land, but people in that there's other people living there. Well, they're now entitled to it financially because they bought it. And so what they tend to do was buy the area, push out whoever was there, displace them, take over, have their own people working there, working the crops or whatever. And so from that very beginning. That's when displacement occurred. And anytime any group is displaced, that leaves a bad taste in your mouth. Nobody wants to be displaced. So you have these groups,
But
and from those groups, you have positions that come naturally. And so you had the Fidea group, which is kind of like the group that was fighting off the settlements and the, and since they're fighting them off, then you have militia groups that, come, that have to grow and come from that, which was like the Irgun, the Haganah. And so now you have these military groups that arise from the situation and the conflict. And so now you have these military groups that come into being.
Let's now like take a look at some of the Palestinian kind of like perspective, because these are people that were there, that had like farmland, that had space, that had this sort of like identity as a nation, that all of a sudden get this influx of people.
Well, it wasn't. I wouldn't say that there was really during that time there wasn't really a Palestinian nationalist movement going on, and that wasn't really what was
that we know of.
But I mean, no, because yeah, there might have been in small parts, but the thing is, before that, it was Ottoman Empire. It was whoever was before that. Then it was the British Empire. The only reason why it's Palestine is even a thing is because the Romans picked that name, and that was kind of like the name used to refer to the region. And so over time, close to during this time, that nationalist movement started to arise because of the people within that area. And that's the name that the Palestinians kind of used to refer to the area, and it's called the Palestine British Mandate.
Well, I can sort of, if I'm putting myself in the shoes of these people, these are people that have never been recognized by anybody. Maybe this is the reason why they're like, hey, look, we have a culture, we have religion, we have land.
Well, it's not necessarily that you're saying like recognized, but at the time the Arabs it was different groups in different cities that they called themselves. And so you could say maybe this village here, this group here, they would consider themselves these people, from the Farah, or I forget the names of all these different places, but you can say that maybe they consider themselves the people of that area under that name. But Palestine it's kind of like the name of the whole region. And it wasn't really until British Mandate came here and referred to the area as Palestine, that's when you can start to say like, oh, this nationalist movement kind of grew, because that's when it's like the reference and the use of the word Palestine is kind of to refer the area and the people. But with before it was kind of like used with other names, and it was kind of like the Ottoman Empire and like this place Palestine, or the Roman Empire and this place Palestina, Syria, Palestina. The name could have been Syria. The name, the people could have been called Syrian, but it's just the different empires that took over, cutting off and renaming the area. That's what happened. And so you had this because you had different Arab groups in that area too. And so once the Jewish people started coming over, you have this
never had an identity, that they never had.
Well, it's not that they didn't have an identity. Of course, everyone has an identity to where they are located. But like I said, that the name Palestine, the only reason why it became such a big thing is the Romans came up with it, and it was just to refer to it's kind of like talking about the Amazon. Nobody calls themselves an Amazonian or a North American or an African. Like you call yourself Nigerian, you can say, but that strong nationalist movement behind the name Palestine wasn't really a thing until the Jews came over and they wanted to establish themselves. And so then the Arab countries, the Arab groups and whatnot became more organized, and they had no choice but to organize because that's the land that the British gave them.
I think, to be honest, Damien, this is around where the Palestinian people, they start to hold this sort of resentment, or not resentment, but maybe this sort of idea of like, damn, they had settled there. I mean,
no, I understand your point. I understand your point, and you're talking about like who was there first, and and like you know, and
Not
and 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 it does you know this the nationalist movement in the bigger scheme of things in the outer, if you step back, it doesn't really matter. Like whether you were wanted to be Palestinian or you wanted to be considered Mexican or whatever, you know, the fact is that there are people there already living there and they were displaced. So I think that's a more important thing. But so when you come up, you're talking about like, because historically Palestine was not really a country. It was the name given to a specific region, and the people within this region, there were different groups, different Arab groups, you know. And the only reason why they kind of the Arab national movement started becoming a thing is because of the Israelis coming in and taking over. So then you have this all the from this chaos of them taking over within what the British called Palestine, the Palestine Mandate, you have this kind of agreement between all the groups. Like, hey, we're being pushed out. This is a common enemy. That kind of unified them, and it started creating this like Arab movement or the Palestinian movement of nationalism. This is why in 1948 you have the establishment of Israel, and you don't have the Declaration of Independence of Palestine until 1988. That's when the Independence of Declaration was declared for Palestine. You know, it's just that Palestine national movement or wasn't really in people's mind until Israel kind of came and they had a common sort of like enemy, and they started, you know, getting to, you know, agreeing. And because you also have different groups that come from this conflict. You have Hamas, you have the Fidea, you know, you have other groups, the PLO, and you have these, and some of these groups they disagree with one another. Like the PLO had a group under some guy Abdu something, and he was viewed by the PLO as a terrorist group, and they disassociated with them. They became enemies, and this has to do with the Lebanon War in 1982. You know, the PLO was they were supported and put and allowed to like go to the north and like retreat from the war while they attacked like the terrorist group, and they fought off like some groups there. I'm sorry. I want to say reiterate the leader of the PLO, because the PLO were part of that fight too. But
I honestly think it's if not wrong, then definitely not the way.
It's complicated. It's just because it's a little complicated, and you need to like it does require some like a knowledge of the history of what was going on and what was established, what groups were there, what were not there, what were the name of some cities at the time, what were, you know, what did people refer to them as? You know, because nobody really referred to themselves as Palestinian. It's like you're not going to call yourself a North American or like Amazoni. Really, you say, "Oh, I'm American," or "Oh, I'm a Houstonian."
But people do in the modern era.
And yeah, now they do, because I said that, you know, that common enemy kind of pushed, and also not only that common enemy, but also the British establishment that created that border. So now you created a border for them, and now they're not really accepting the British mandate, because they also remember the Palestinians in that time, and I call them Palestinians because once Palestine created that border, and the British said, okay, as an empire, the controlling empire, they called it Palestine. That's Palestine.
The thing is, they never created the border. The border was like
the border. Yeah, you know who drew that border? Palestine. I mean, the British Empire. The British. I'm sorry. Yeah, the British Empire, which is the empire that took control. So whenever any region is taking control over an empire, what do you call that? That's Rome. Those are the Greeks. Whatever empire has won the war, whether you like to accept it or not, that's what dominates and that's what governs. And so the British Empire dominated through war, and they controlled the region, and they said, okay, we're going to control this. This is the Transjordan region, and this is Palestine. And within Palestine, we're going to have the Palestine people living in there, but we're also going to have the Jews living there. And that was their idea, right? But then they were like, damn, they're fine. They don't both groups don't like this. So the Peel Commission comes in and says, you know what? We got to do a partition. So we're going to try to break it up into half. The people who are already there don't like it. The people who are moving in, they're kind of like okay with it, because like, hey, this is a stepping stone. It's allowing us to move in, so we'll take it. Of course, the people moving in are going to be for it. In this case, the Jews, the migrants, they're going to be like, yeah, well, okay, shit, we'll take whatever you give us. And then little by little, they're growing eventually. And once the British take, so once the British leave, There's no longer an empire controlling. Now this is kind of like a free for all. The UN is there to kind of like put in their whatever recommendations, but that's all the UN. The UN doesn't really have much power besides kind of like being a mediator and recommending shit, and that's it. Because
yeah,
is because sort of Israel,
like
go ahead.
The second coming of like British involvement, because obviously there's the after the Ottoman Empire, they leave. Now World War II, they sort of like come back in this kind of like mediating kind of.
So they come back with the French for a different reason. Nothing really to do with the situation. Like once they're done with Israel, they're kind of done with it. They come back because of their own interests. Because later on they come back because of the Suez Canal, war, which is a war that the British, the French, and Israel were in, and it had to do with the control over the canal, which was a major canal, important canal, which is the Suez Canal in Egypt. It's in the border of Egypt and like Israel, and so this canal created access for the British to get shipments going in and out from like India and in that part of the world, and it cuts like them having to go around all of Africa. You see, instead of going down all the way from Africa and going up to go to, they're able to just go through this canal that cuts through Egypt and Israel. And so this is a canal that was funded by a British entrepreneur. And so it's pretty much British control. They financed it. And then as Nasser comes into power in Egypt, he decides, this was built by Egyptians, and this is on our part of this is our part of our country. We're gonna nationalize it. We're gonna take control over it. But how do they do it? They didn't go to war or kill anybody or steal it. They bought it off. They paid for it. They bought it off, and they bought it off at a fair price during the market price at the time. So they paid. It was fair the way they got it. It was fine. They paid for it. But the way that they went about controlling it was not in favor of the British or the French, because by cutting them off from the access to that, you're pretty much cutting off their supply. And so economically, this was like suicide for the British. This is not in their interest. So they're willing to go to war for it. But they don't want to appear like they're the instigators or the people starting the war. So they come up with this agreement with Israel and the French, a secret meeting where they say, okay, you're going to start the war, and we're going to go in there and mediate and say, okay, no more fighting, and you guys have to walk. You guys need to get 40 miles away from the area, which they knew the Egypt was going to say no to. So that gives them like the green light to go and say, okay, this is the ultimatum. You don't like it? Then we're going to have to go to war with you. And so Israel went, and the IDF went to war with Egypt on the pretext that they were going after the Vadea and the Sinai Peninsula, or in Sinai region, which is a canal where the canal is. But if there's no terrorist or Fidea group or Palestinian group, whatever you want to call it. That group is not there. They were in the Gaza Strip. But this is later on in history.
Yeah, well, this is
I want to backtrack before we get to where I left off, which it's the Habar Agreement with the Nazi movement and all this going on. So before you hold your questions, let me just finish that point off, and then I'm almost done with where I'm at. So you have this movement pushing and supporting the Jews all around the world. You have, unfortunately, this new region unstabilized and led by the British, and so now you have Israel in 1948, which declares independence. And as soon as the British mandate leaves, the empire leaves, the British Empire leaves, right? The Arab countries, you have Lebanon, you have Iraq, you have hold on, I got it right here, so I can be more accurate at what I'm saying here. There it is. So you have Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, and Egypt, and this creates the Arab-Israel First World War, not World War. And there's already a Palestine-Israel war and internal conflict going on. There's already wars here. These groups are killing each other off. And Palestinian, the Fidea and their groups, they start off fighting off the people moving in. So they're attacking like their their shipments, their military, their business operations of business. And so they're being a little tactical and trying to get rid of them, like push them off. This is their resistance towards the newcomers. And then you have the Aragon that come out and they start killing out. They start finding the groups. And at the same time, you have, these massacres going on. The Aragon are killing like people in villages and stuff. And they're killing, innocent civilians, kids. Then you have the suicide bombing going on. You have people in the Aragon, which later on get categorized as a terrorist group because of their approach on these war tactics. So they start bombing like places like the David Hotel that kills like a whole bunch of British people, and like because they're also against the British, before the British leave, they're also against them, and they're against like the Palestinians there. And so you have a lot of this fighting going on. It's nasty. It's just terroristic approaches and different groups and murder. And so then you have the Arab War because they get involved because they don't see the Jewish because they don't see him as Muslims, so they don't see him as, and they see him as the group that shouldn't be there. So they side with the Palestinians. They try to take control over the region. Guess what happens in that Arab-Israel war? The fucking
wait, this is after Egypt loses the war with
no, this is before. This 1948 is when they declared independence, and as soon as the day after they declared independence, or like the night of the declaration, they get attacked by these nations. Well, they're able to fight them off, and they win. And they create, and also this is where you have the IDF that comes, and the IDF stems from like the groups that pretty much the already established groups. They get organized. You the Haganah, the Aragon, the Lehi, and volunteers, and they pretty much create this, one state military, and it's so you have that happening, and then once the fighting stops, there's an agreement, the armistice agreement, 1949. Some parts of it were, some things were in the agreement were kind of like broken. There's a lot of history that goes in there. And then you have the Swiss War in 1956. This is what I was talking about, the canal under Nasser, the Egypt president. And, more massacres happen. And then you have the loss of land. And then, this is during that war, I think it was it under the Swiss War? Let me see real quick. Oh, but you had a question, Maudie, you were trying to ask? Well, look into this.
No, I'm just sort of I'm hearing this, and maybe this is to do with like the Palestinian perspective. Maybe I don't want to play too much into like their side of it because that could get me canceled. But I'm just thinking they're human beings. I'm a human being too. So I'm thinking like this is Israel. To me, it sounds, if I was a Palestinian, this sounds like Israel is a military, conquering, warring nation. In this, you know what I mean? Like there's and obviously Israel has had the support of NATO, of the UN for at least, we want to say maybe 70, 80 years. And I'm just thinking in terms of of these people, the Palestinian people, that maybe we think that their struggle of independence or their rise to create their own state has been recent and maybe has probably less claim than the Israeli side. But I do think that these people have been ostracized and have been left to the side and never recognized, never.
Well, I don't, like I said, I'm not going to go ahead and pick a side yet. I'm not going to, I don't really, hopefully don't have to pick a side. But you're talking about like the recent history going on and their conflicts and the occupation and settlements. I haven't gotten to that point yet. I'm actually towards the end of my research, and I have. So I think my thing is that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Let me know if you can hear yourself on the TV.
No.
And no. 3. Hold on. Can you hear yourself say something?
Hello.
You can't hear yourself, right?
Hello.
Okay.
No, can't hear.
Things should be fine. So no. My headphone just died. I should have charged them last night. But Yeah, so you're kind of like referring to like the recent history and occupation. I haven't gotten to that point yet, and there's a lot of stuff that's there's a lot also that I've learned, and a lot of things that the IDF have done, and also the Aragon have done, and I'm not ready to speak on those atrocities, and there's a lot. Yeah, so right now it might seem like I'm favoring the Jewish side, but I'm really not. I'm just trying to tell you the history of how it went down, what I've learned. But there's some information that I've learned that if you were to hear it and look at it out of context or even in context, you're going to definitely not side with the IDF or like the Jewish state. So this is not really about picking a side or siding with the Palestinian people or the Jewish people, because I understand both plights. I understand both reasoning why this is going on, and I can see where the people who were already there are fighting for their land, and why the people who went there fought for that land, and why they were kind of like supported during the Holocaust movement, and and also during the turmoil or the fuck up of the British even allowing this to occur. But so I guess I'll just wait for Marty to get back. He left briefly to go to the restroom.
You can edit this all out.
I'm back.
Oh, damn, was that a quick piss?
Yep.
Did you even sip it up? You didn't even wash your hands, you dirty man.
Fuck, dude. Leave this in. Leave this in the podcast.
I am gonna leave it in. I want people to know you're.
Let me go wash my hands.
You just went and exposed yourself, let it go out everywhere, and then you just closed it up and you ran back. Oh, now he is washing it. So I was playing. I guess he really didn't.
You can't call him out, dude, and expect him not to do things.
I'm gonna edit this part to where I cut the part off where he goes back to wash his hands.
Yeah, edit that part out.
He never washes his hands. He's a dirty, filthy man.
Yeah, leave this in. I want a moment to fucking laugh at ourselves. No, leave it in. Leave it in.
Okay, so yeah, so you have that's where my research pretty much is. With the canal, and then also the 6-Day War. Whoa. Okay, so kind of like
1960s, right?
Was that
1960s?
Yes. So the Suez Canal is 1956. This the 6-Day War is like in 1967. So 11 years later, basically. 11 years. So this war, it's such man. This is a war with Egypt and it's Jordan? Yeah, Egypt and Jordan, I believe. So while there's all this going on with the settlers and occupation inside of Israel and so who's in control right now? After the Suez Canal, there's an agreement, right? Because they go to war not only with Egypt, but they also go to war with, I believe, Jordan. And then they come up with this armistice in 1949 and agree to a new line, the green line, which later became like the blue line, and agree to we're not gonna fight in there. We're gonna keep our distance. We're gonna respect that. It didn't last too long, and so at that time you have Egypt controlling the west, the Gaza Strip, and then you have Jordan controlling the West Bank. And then you have the Golan Heights with Syria, but that comes later on in history. And so one question that arose, and I haven't answered yet because I'm still in research for this, but it's like, since Egypt controlled, Gaza Strip, why isn't it that they just pretty much merged and became one, and you just call it Egypt and everyone gets their freedoms and rights? And why did the Jordans call Palestine part of their own, and just everyone stuff like that? Why didn't that happen? That's a question, and then being separate and whatnot. It's kind of like a new empire taking over in a way, but that didn't happen, and we're still kind of here in square one with this conflict. But anyways, I'm going to say that, of course, it's because the people were displaced and trying to get back to their homes.
Well, because Egypt because Egypt has its own nation, its own nationalistic view,
Right. But it's like still not
whereas the
the
people in
Arab,
Gaza
the
have always
Palestinian
had
declaration really hasn't occurred yet. But but there is that movement already going for it, and also there's a lot of resentment and war that's been going on, displacement. So they're just trying to get back to their land naturally. So that's definitely a big cost. And so even though they're under the control of maybe the Egyptians or the Arabs, they're still, their mind is, the people are still, in that mindset, or that, wanting to go back home, trying to regain their power, their family members being killed recently, and, and new generations growing up in that environment and that tension and fighting. So it's just like a cycle that's going to keep feeding itself. They're trying to move back in. So you have so there's agreement to cease fire. It lasts for like 10, 11 years. So there's peace for like that time with them. But then you have the 6-day war, which is insane, because this is where, besides that initial pretext of going into war with Egypt for attacking the Fidea, they come up with this, I guess they have so one of the benefits was having some control of the area that they needed to have control or access to, which is kind of like another area where I forgot the strait something. It's kind of like another canal, I think, that they have control over, where they can have, shipments coming in and out. So Israel gets control of that, or has access to it, and Egypt allows it under this armistice. But Nasser later on, the people lost this war against them. They're hurt. They kind of they're or it's not that they lost the war, but it was never really finished. And so there's this movement also in Egypt, and military movement, to kind of like become dominant and established. And so they pretty much close access to them. And the Israels, they said, if you close access use of that to us, it's pretty much giving us the right to attack you. They call it. I should have written it down. Let me see the word real quick. But it's kind of like Calibellus. So it's a word that means, that we have is a justified reason to attack. And so once they close access to them, the IDF pretty much attacked Egypt. But the Egyptians, their fault was they knew that this was going to cause a war. And so before they close it, whenever they close off access to Israel, they announced to the UN to leave the area. They told the UN, leave the area here in the Sinai Peninsula, or the Sinai zone. So when they get that warning, and the UN was started, they get the warning, and the UN is starting to leave, the IDF, knowing that this is their moment to attack or to go into war, they took the opportunity to attack. So they caught the Egyptians by surprise. And it's like, how is it that this small region is able to dominate for so long and stay in power when you have all these Arab nations that are trying to attack and destroy it? And right now it's about to get attacked by Egypt and Jordan. Well, this is where I have to admit that this military superiority comes into place, and it's like, whoa, it's kind of amazing to kind of like see how they it's kind of like a chess match, and they play their moves perfectly. Even though I wouldn't say that it was kind of right, because they didn't allow the UN to leave on time, because when they strike the Egyptians first, as the UN was leaving, they killed some UN members. And anyways, they carry out their attack, right? And this is kind of like modern warfare, because you have planes attacking. And in this 6-day war, they're able to like so the IDF goes and attacks, right? And they have their planes. And not only that, there's information out there that before their attack, they pay like I think an Egyptian, or they paid him like $1 million for intel. And it was one of the pilots. So they were able to get access to like the plane and look at the weaknesses and whatnot. So that gave them an upper hand in war also. But whenever they carried out their initial attack by some element of surprise, they destroyed like 80% of the Egyptian Air Force. So they attacked these bases that had all these airplanes, and they destroyed 80% of them right off the bat before Egypt could even attack or move. And one of their biggest their flaws was that these airplanes they were out in the open on these like air base these bases, military bases. They weren't like in hangars, they weren't even secured. They were like all scattered around the place out in the open. So when the IDF went to attack them and destroy them, it was like easy. All they went, they just flew, destroyed them left and right. Any like planes and whatnot.
Where is all this funding? I mean, we talk about, obviously this was an easy attack from Israel on Egypt and a way to win, that conflict in a very swift way, the 6-day war. But where is all this funding coming from to make Israel, this superior military power?
The United States, and it's different. Like, remember, this is right after like the Holocaust, right? So this is like world nationalist movement support all around the world, basically. So in the United States, you have like the Jewish like lobbyist group and organizations here that have been sending money there. Although over time they're sending a little less money now. But at that time, it was just money coming in from who knows every direction. The United States for sure, and later on in their wars, they get U.S. equipment sent out over there. I forget whether they got U.S. funding or military support during this war, but they definitely attacked Egypt in that war, and the Suez Canal, or the 6-day war. They pretty much neutralized them in like the first day, and then the Egyptians go out and lie and say that they're okay, and they give the Jordans like green light. Oh, we're winning, or we're doing whatever we need to be doing. Come in and support. And so the Jordans come in and they attack Israel, and then they get pushed off, and they find out later on, oh shit, the Egyptians are been destroyed. So then, within 6 days, that's why we call it the 6-day war. And this is when Israel pushes them out, wins the war, and is able to have their control of the region grows. They control parts of like Jordan, and they control like the whole Egyptian peninsula. And later on, through another agreement, another war, they were to, give it back and all that.
But back to the people, because we have to remember that there's Palestinian people or of Palestinian identity in the West Bank, and then there's the Gaza Strip. So somewhere along the way, I don't know if this is where you're getting to in your research. Maybe we should probably extend this to another podcast where we talk about the modern history rather than the inception.
Definitely, for sure, exactly.
Unraveling of two nations. There's only one nation here that is internationally recognized, but just want to keep track of time. We're approaching almost the 2-hour mark. So maybe do we want to talk about U.S. involvement, or do we sort of want to finish on the historical research?
Well, here, if you want to, ask about the U.S. involvement, or you want to lead us into that. Let's go into that. That's something. To talk.
Is that something to talk about, or is that around the point in history where you are in your research, or is there a little bit more? Because now we're stepping into
to use involvement, I'm not quite there yet, because they weren't really involved until a little later in all this. I mean, there are, of course, there's the support, but the actual military it doesn't occur until a little later. I mean, you have their support really shows during the later war in October 1973, when you have the Harry Kissinger, who comes in and he becomes like a diplomat and negotiates. And this is during the Nixon administration, and Nixon couldn't really do anything because he's in a Watergate scandal, but he appointed Harry Kissinger, and he did a phenomenal job of like going in there and being the with Egypt, and who else was it? Was it Jordan or Syria? I forgot. But he goes and mediates pretty much and agrees, and he goes and talks to the leaders. Oh, it was Syria. So this is what Sadat, the president, he's a president at the time for Egypt, and you have Assad, the president of Syria. They're both at war with Israel, and they're not really getting anywhere. There's a lot of deaths on both sides, and they're kind of at a stalemate. and Kissinger is able to go over there and try to negotiate with both sides. And he talks to the leaders, and he's able to like come up with an agreement for the IDF, and for the Egyptian military. And he's able to stop the fighting. They agree. They sit down and agree. This is when they get their land back of that region, and they agree to fully get out of there by like 82 or whatever it was. And then he's able to do the same thing with Syria. And of course, with Syria, they have problems later on that that they're supporting Lebanon in another war. And I haven't gotten to finish that off yet. But yeah, this is when I think the U.S. involvement is at the all-time high, and also because and the reason why they get involved, I believe, has to do with the Russian. During the Cold War, there was almost a time where World War III was going to occur. Russia and the Soviet Russia and the U.S. were going to come to war, and this is when the Arabs cut off their supplies of petroleum. In the United States, the petroleum price goes up, or they raise the price up. And so, there's like this in 1973, that historically, this is when oil was at an all-time high, and there was not a lot. There's a scarcity going on, and you had these gas stations where they're piled up. And the reason why is because they rejected the prices, and there was fear that there was going to be no more oil. Some people were also going, exacerbating the situation by going out and trying to purchase all the oil they could, kind of like the toilet paper effect. That was the effect also with the oil back then.
I guess my question, maybe this is like, stepping away from sort of like, the inception of the conflict, and like, the cultural, historical aspect of it, and all the wars in between, and all the aggressions from both sides. What has been the United States kind of approach and solution towards this conflict? Because, I've heard the two-state solution.
Yeah, well, you have the Oslo Accord, under like Bill Clinton, and you have other approaches that try to negotiate peace, and also figures in the UN and UN try. So those are like some major ones. You have Obama try to do it, Trump try to do it, and I think Trump's attempt was like considered a complete failure, and like an agreement with a lot of holes. And basically, I think many say that it favored only Israelis.
Well, I mean, they appointed Jared.
Yeah, but and so that's right. He appointed his son, right? And so it's been many political or like presidents have tried, and they failed, and I haven't, like I said, my research really stops at like the Suez Canal, and I have a little bit of knowledge of the 6-Day War, but I'm not really well versed yet on all of that. I'm still doing my research, but that's where I stop. There are things I've learned about the occupation that things that are not looking good for the people in these occupations. I mean, Israel is in control. Let me just say that the new empire, even though British left, and once the IDF was established, and they attacked and fended off from the Arabs, and and all these wars, they were able to come up on top and pretty much stand their ground. You can't deny that this is kind of like the new empire that's grown from the Jewish nation, or the Jewish community. And so you have this nation now with a military, a government, a police, that's well established, and it's more centralized, more so than the Palestinian side. And they have controlled the whole region, and they fought for it. And somehow even though they have all the control, this new empire, they haven't completely, if they wanted to, under ancient like empire control, they could have annihilated Gaza Strip and the West Bank. And so their approach is, I'm not going to say that it's fair, but it's more fair than the Crusader approach, or their previous empires. And
well, I don't know,
because when it comes to military, they have a military, as you can see today. I guess in a way they are finally taking that route of just becoming the dominant empire and completely killing off everybody, because you see how much power they have now, and they're implementing it on Gaza. Will it go to West Bank? Who knows? But this is just something that unfortunately, whether you like the empire or not, it is the empire that's dominating right now. And I'm
Yeah,
not
but
saying that they're
maybe
right for it or not. And also with the occupations, they're, the way they're doing it, it's kind of like they're doing it in a, how do I say, kind of like a political way, where they're not completely displacing them right off the bat. They're displacing as politically right as they can, where permits or purchase of land and segregation and little by little dominate, which is
and you can say that
the end result.
you can say that that's a political move, the displacement of all of these people from the West Bank. But you just have to look at some of the I guess,
I mean,
you
if you live
have
in the United
to
States,
to really understand what is happening with all of these like settlements. Are we talking about the settlements now?
yeah. So we're kind of down. Yeah, we're kind of skipping a little bit of history, and we're kind of venturing and something that I'm just going to talk off, but not with. I'm gonna admit not the best knowledge over it, but it's just like so far where I'm at, where my mind is at, and it's subject to change as the more I learn, and and now you're starting to see me sound like I'm kind of disagreeing now with the Israeli side. I'm talking about these occupations and how they're going about it.
Yeah,
And
and this is
how they're
exactly
doing
why.
it, and they're some of the ways that these settlers, these different groups are taking over, and ways are under Geneva Convention or under the UN. They're considered illegal. It's they're not right. I mean, yes, I agree. Some of these like tag prices attacks that they do, I don't agree with. Cutting off sewage or like dumping their sewage into like their area is something that's documented of happening that I don't agree with. This little stuff like that is happening like a local level. I don't agree with. But now, do I respect the new empire that's taking place? It's not that I respect or don't respect. It's just like it is what it is. That's just the empire that's taking over. And as a person here, far away from that situation, or even just as a person with no military, no control, no power, or no even financial power, my voice or my opinion doesn't even mean jack shit. First of all, it is dick compared to the empire. So we can all have an opinion, but you don't. The real point is we have our own empire, which just like the Israel empire grew, we grew from the 13 colonies, right? And they grew and they started taking over because this land was previously owned by the natives. And you can kind of say that the natives were kind of like the Palestinians, right? It's the same fucking concept. We are a nation from 13 colonies that came and we enforced our will and we took over. We displaced the people and we had the Trail of Tears. I mean, we committed some fucking massacres ourselves here historically, but this is an empire that we all supported and we still raise our flags in support of, whether by ignorance or not. We the way we conquered this land is almost the same way that Israel's trying to conquer the land, and I'm living in this land today. I mean, I can't deny that I like the laws and the democracy and the wealth that we share here and that we have. And if it weren't for the way we got here, then we wouldn't be here. So I'm in a better place because of that ugly history. Unfortunately, that's what it took to get us here. And I have no control over that. If I could and I could have the power to say, hey, let's fix it up and still be here where we are, I would do it. I would if I had that power. But we're all small people compared. If you don't have an empire, your opinion is only that, because the actual empire is where the power, the freedom, it all comes from. We have what we have because of the U.S. empire. Israel's have what they have because of their Israel empire, and also the allies that we've created. So whether the killing of all these kids right now in this conflict, fuck, it's terrible. I'm against it wholeheartedly. I don't want that. Just like I don't want the killings of the October 7th, the killings. I'm not for that. But this is not in my control, and this is up to the higher powers, the empires, to really dictate where it's going to come, or these groups. And as an American paying taxes, and collectively, all of us paying taxes, we have the power to say, hey, that's our money. If we don't agree with it, as a popular group, we don't agree with the money going to Israel. We have the right to protest it. If we are for Israel as a whole group, and we are okay with the money going there to fund what they're doing, we have the right for that too, because that's the only power that we hold.
Yeah,
I
this is
think.
a good footnote to sort of like stop and kind of like begin the next one, which is, looking at like the modern aspect of this
Yeah,
world,
yeah.
of this war, the current state of events, and maybe like and dig a little deeper into the involvement of the US, which I do think is necessary in this case, because now we're talking about humanitarian reasons why we need to maybe support as well the Palestinian side, because these are all people that, though they may be connected to Hamas because of their government, these are still human beings that are being displaced, that are being killed. And and also look at the terrorist attack from Hamas towards Israel, because like we said at the beginning, there is no point in time and there's no reason that is justifiable enough to like bomb and kill civilians in that kind of random way.
Yeah.
We're 2023 and it's still going on. So
Yeah, and what's going on is horrendous, and it's awful, and I would never wish that on anyone. It's what's going on, the killing of all these kids and all these innocent people. But I'm not there on my research yet to really completely say that there's no reasoning behind it. I want to know the reason before I can even give my opinion fully. But it's wrong to me, and if you want to say that it's completely wrong no matter what, that's okay. I haven't formulated that opinion yet. I will, and I will come to this, a conclusion over once I'm done with all this. I'll have a firm opinion on the matter and whether I fully agree or disagree. And yes, as much right now without much knowledge to really actually have full conviction on what's wrong or what's right, I will say that at the moment I do feel that the bombardments of Gaza with innocent people is wrong. Just because it's too much collateral that's being killed off. And so in that, and I will say that right now to me it looks like that's very wrong, and it's horrible. And if there's a different approach, that should have been sought out instead of bombing the shit out of everybody. From what I know right now, my view is that they should send military to go on a ground fight and go actually after the terrorists at Hamas and kill them off like that.
Well, they're doing that now.
They're doing it now after they level it off, and they pretty much killed a shit ton of people.
Yep.
So you can't undo that anymore. But at the same time, my own opinion is only valid as a taxpayer through our money going there. That's the only power we have really to tell our representatives to do something or like. But that's as far as we go. If we stop funneling money, and as a state or an empire, they want to go about continuing to bomb and kill and pretty much destroying all of Gaza and the West Bank, that's going to be their way of dealing with it. Our hands would be clean. And if we want to take the new approach of like saying, hey, wanting to interfere, that's a different discussion. But I don't think anyone wants to really interfere with Israel, or I don't think we're in a state and a time and place where most of the nation will be for that. We're very divided.
No, I feel for it's nearly impossible given how Gaza is. If you're going to do any battle, any war, there's going to be loss of lives of innocent. It's like, I mean, it's just impossible. Something so densely populated like that.
Yeah,
it can't happen, even if you have boots on the ground.
Right.
So do we want
to? That made me think about something else, and it was this one political cartoon that is
from CNN. I was going to ask you, but I wrote it down right here.
Let's see.
I want to see that. Yeah, I was going to ask you about the CNN cartoon that you were saying.
See it?
Here, can you make it bigger? Or no? That's good. How dare Israel attack civilians? And what is that?
So,
Oh,
so the guy that they're portraying is one of the, I forgot his name, but
he's the
he's one
leader
of
of
the
the
leaders
Hamas
of
group. Yeah,
Hamas.
yeah, that's the leader of the Hamas group. That's him. Which
So
do they
this
say
was the
that?
political cartoon that everyone got really upset about. That was posted on the Washington Post, and they ended up taking it down
Right. And they
because they
say
said it
that
was racist.
the Hamas group, like the leaders, that that it's corrupt and that they live in like they're like billionaires and they don't even live in like anywhere in any of the Palestine regions. They live like outside and like in luxury and they travel in like jets, private jets and stuff. I mean,
I
when
don't.
I've seen him in a few like speeches and interviews, and yeah, he wears some really nice clothes, and he does
Well,
travel with with the whole fancy entourage.
well, I guess this was the kind of the cartoon that everyone kind of shares his opinion because they've all been listening to the news about Hamas, putting some of their, I guess their headquarters in areas that, you know, I don't
Yeah.
know if this is true or not, but I
Well,
hear that maybe one of the main headquarters is in a hospital. It's like,
yeah.
they're pretty much like being like, yep, we're gonna put it here because, obviously, Israel will have a limit, and if they do pass that limit to kill us, they're definitely gonna tarnish their name so badly because they're also killing a lot of innocent people. So I
Well,
guess that's the message
there's
here. It's kind of
well,
like
what
they're willing to
just like I said
go
with
to those
Israel,
extremes.
yeah, just like I said with Israel, about their approach, I haven't really formulated a concrete conclusion on whether that, is justified or not justified, or, I gotta look at all the context, all the history and stuff, and also the same thing with Hamas. I don't want to formulate an opinion and say, that they're hiding behind civilians. I don't know the whole story behind that, and they have tunnels underneath that they build supposedly. This is all information I'm going to research. And I'm going to have, be able to conclude and unfortunately in a world where there's so much conjecture because there's so much, information that's misinformation and you don't even know whether it's right or not. And, throughout the course of history, the IDF has been caught lying and, reporting their news, their propaganda, and the same thing with the Palestinian military groups and other Arab countries military groups putting out their propaganda. So
No,
throughout
but
this modern
I, I,
history,
def- I, def- I can definitely see Hamas using that strategy because it's
I
kind of like
I don't know yet. I
it's
don't know yet. This is Hamas, a group that was elected or in 2008 or 2007 when they came into power. I don't know the
no, I'm
history yet
just
on
saying
that, so
like you like
I can't even talk on that yet because I want to know exactly how this came to be. Why is there backup support to it? There's more. There's always going to be more. There's always more to each side. I want to hear both sides before anything. Right now, this is what I've laid out is just the history from the beginning to where there was like the first group of people that were Jewish in the area, and then how they came in, how they lost them, the area controlled, the Arabs controlled it, then the Ottomans and the British, and where we are now, and just a little bit on some recent wars. But there's so
no,
much in
but
between
you
everything.
don't you can't see Hamas using that as a strategy.
It's just that I don't know why or whether that's even true or
Why?
not.
Because it's just kind of like you shoot me, you end up shooting yourself in the foot too, because you end up
Yeah.
killing civilians, innocents, and
Well,
it's
I
just
don't. You see, I
bad.
can't talk on that because I don't know the like I said, I don't know the actual
I
research into it, so I can't really
think
talk on why that's
I
happening.
think
Maybe it's
to be
really
honest,
happening.
I think they're Hamas, and I just want to talk about maybe just say this: like Hamas is a radical group that had no plan, and
You
then
know,
they're
based on the
led
October 7th
by
attack, yes,
hatred
you can.
and
That's
terrorist actions. Like bombing 1,500 people has no it has no rationality
you see.
behind it. Oh, we'll
I
do
think
it.
I think what
With
you're
the
doing
spread
right now,
of Israel.
and that's okay. And what you're doing right now, it's kind of like during the BLM protests, how some businesses were saying like
No,
BLM, don't attack me, even though they might not support it. I don't want to say that that's what's going on here, but I feel like that's what's going on in some scenarios and discussions. And I'm just not, even though, yes, with Piers Morgan, all he wants to do is just every guest he goes on with. And Piers Morgan, what he's doing is phenomenal. He's having both sides come. What he's doing is awesome. and any gains profit that he's making off of this, I fully support, because he's giving us access to debates from both sides, of this situation, which is giving voice to them. So that's awesome. His platform right now, fucking awesome when it comes to having both sides coming in and talking. So I support that fully. But the one thing is that he does is he keeps asking everybody, do you condemn, Hamas? And it's kind of like this thing that if you don't say that, you're going to be canceled or whatnot. And it's like, that's kind of that's kind of like restriction of speech. And it's kind of manipulating your way of thinking.
Ask the people in Gaza if they
let me just finish. Let me just finish this
bombing civilians.
I understand that. I know where he's going at, and I understand why people have to oppose him. They have to, push themselves away from that. I understand that, and as well you should. Based on those actions, yes, that's egregious. Yes, that's a war crime. Yes, that's terroristic. Yes, you condemn that to the fully, and so do I. Based on that, but I don't. Like I said, how can I talk on something that I don't have research on? Based on what I'm seeing and what you're telling me, what the news is telling me, I'm going to be like, yeah, that's fucked up, egregious.
Yeah, that's all. That's all. It's just like you just have to have an impression.
But I don't want to give out my opinion or full on something that I don't know, because right now we're just looking at one part in history, like what happened with Hamas. You're going to be like, hey, look, I'm not saying that this would happen, but what if the reason why Hamas did this is because you're looking at this like this iceberg and you're only seeing the tip. What about the bottom part? You're seeing this happen, but what happened before that, or what? I want to know what happened before that and what's going on after and what's going on now, so I can really formulate my opinion. Because what if Hamas? What if like everyone in that group in Hamas had their kid killed execution style by the IDF? What if that happened? We don't. I'm not saying that's what happened.
No, that's exactly what
excuse. This is just a not excuse. This is just a hyperbole. I don't know if that's what happened. If that's what happened, fuck. I would, if somebody did that to my family, I would.
Well, I'll tell you what.
I'm sure. I'm not saying that I'm going to do it, or I'm pushing for that. I'm not pushing for any of that. That's a crime. You should be killed for it, and charged to the fullest. But if somebody attacked me, if a criminal came in my house and murdered my family, what my first thing would be, I want to kill that motherfucker too.
No, the resentment that Hamas and stuff like that. Yeah, like you say, it's a loaded history of a lot of eye for an eyes throughout the whole time.
And so I want to know what exactly led up to that, and what happened before, what happened then, what happened now. I just want to be, before I even say, oh, I condemn everybody, jump so quick to jump and condemn left and right. I don't want to condemn nobody. I don't even care about whether you condemn them or not. I'm not affiliated with them. They don't mean anything to me. I don't support terrorism. I don't support murder. I have a job and I live and I provide for my family. That's what I care about. I'm a family guy. I want to hang out with my friends. I want everyone to live in peace. I want, the LGBT community to live in peace. I want everybody to live in peace, as long as we're not fucking with each other. And so I'm definitely not about any of that shit. And I just want to know, before I talk, before you talk about anybody, I think anyone should have this mentality. Before anyone talks about anything, they should have some background or some knowledge at least. And it's okay to talk about knowledge. You can talk about knowledge all you want. But for myself, I hold myself to a higher standard, and I want to, be able to, before, I get into something, let me just look into it real quick.
It's okay.
In a topic like this, because there's other topics that are irrelevant that
I
don't really need to get into.
At some point, yes, you can have all of that historical aspect, and I commend you for doing that research as well. But there's also moments where you have to condemn both sides of what is happening. And I know what you're trying to do. Okay, I'm not going to judge Hamas, and I'm not going to judge Israel.
It's not that I'm not condemning.
I'll say it before, because I know I haven't said much.
Okay. But sorry. Yeah, go. All right. You're right.
Yeah, there's been wrongdoing on both sides. Israel has limited these people from having economic opportunity. They have to line up, and they have to go to Israel to build their buildings, and then go back to their open air prison, and where they have no clean water, where they have no way of having economic prosperity. These are people that have been shut off from the world, from having some trade agreements. The only people that maybe like support them could be like, I don't know, I guess other Muslim nations. And people dying because of those living conditions is so densely populated. It's no wonder that these people have radicalized. And then you look at the Israeli side, kind of like putting a wall, a border wall.
Right.
So
it's a little more than a border wall too. I mean, there's military and their presence, and they actually will shoot to kill, I believe. So it's a little more than just the border wall that we have here, which is our wall is not really a wall. It's kind of like wall here and then this much open there. So you can, it's a little different. And also remember, this is like this half the size of New Jersey. So the territory and the area is so small. But no, I know what you're saying, dude. And I don't want to get too much into that because my knowledge is not there yet. I still have so much more research to do, and hopefully we can get to it next time where I can come out with better answers and more formulated opinions and more, a stance where based on what I've learned, I can, I'm confident to back up and say some things. Right now, I'm not there yet. And when it comes to like, you're saying that we should condemn something. Yeah, you should condemn something that to be like wrong completely. And, like I said, I condemn the murder and the action of the terrorist approach and killing of innocent people, the people in that event completely condemn that. Did I say condemn? I'm now confused with condemn. My bad.
How do we feel about, like, I know like Hamas went and they killed, I guess, obviously civilians, but how would we feel if they just try to, if they were just fighting military versus military, would we just be like, that's just how it is?
There would definitely be a different approach, and because then that would be considered more of a resistance or a position to occupation and settlement, and that could be considered different because you're going after like a military. These are people who are in the line, and that's their duty to fight and for whatever they believe their government. And it would be state versus state. Taking off innocent people out of the equation, there would be more support for that, and that would be different.
Well, I mean, there's no diplomatic way of declaring war. Like, someone always has to kind of go like drop the fucking whatever attack.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe Hamas's point. I was gonna think maybe Hamas's point of view is like, well, all these people were soldiers at one point because how Israel has you have to serve. So, but they're not active soldiers, they're on reserve.
Oh, right.
So they're just like,
hey, you might be right about that. But but you're killing kids, then that means that logic kind of goes out the
there
window.
you go. That kind of throws that one out, right?
And old people too, and also it's like they're not military anymore either way. So that's an argument that I can kind of see where we're going with that. It's a good little food for thought. But no. They
obviously, like, I was just thinking about. I guess I just blocked that out of my mind.
Yeah.
Okay, Marty, back to you about condemning Hamas and all that. That you're saying.
I was talking.
You have to condemn them.
Yeah, it was Joe.
Yeah, Damien. Let me talk.
I thought you're still on my back.
Right, I'll finish my thought.
Okay, what's that?
Okay. Yeah, when Hamas did their attack, they obviously killed, children. And Israel, they do the same thing, but what's not clear is that they at least say, like, they're like, oh, well, that was a base. We were attacking a terrorist base, or like something like that. You know what I mean? It's kind of like blanketed. You know what I mean? But Hamas's intentions were very clear. Israel, you can believe them or not. You know what I mean? You can believe them or not. But Hamas, there's no believe it or not. They murdered children. You know what I mean? So it's different. And you can't say that, maybe I don't know, that whole organization, because there's a lot of hatred in there. And we were just talking about the peoples with holding the guns. We're not talking, no Hamas official, the guys in charge went down there. Who knows? It could have been like a 16-year-old kid who was, because they I'm sure they don't just recruit older people. They probably recruit a lot of teenagers too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And give them guns.
Hamas, the military group is made up on average 18-year-olds, and they have a huge young population. And
Yeah.
I saw the GoPro footage too. And look, whenever you're doing like some military attacks like that, or not, it's too many people to, and this, who knows how organized this attack was. And you have too many people
Yeah.
involved and scattered around that taking over. Not, one guy in the military, 20% of the, or maybe 50 or 80% might go in there with like high standards of, I'm Muslim, but I'm just here to take hostages. That's the mission plan. But is that mission, how organized are they, and what is
Yeah.
their overall mission? And you have 20 a number that's like young and stupid and with a gun and military, and they've been whole life thinking, oh, they've been killing us, I have the right to kill whoever I want. So you have different individuals in that terrorist group coming in the attack that they're like, okay, I just kill whoever. And that's what you see in GoPros, like some
because
of
you're
them showing old people, and like, and it's
Yeah.
like, damn, that's fucking sick.
Because to be honest, and I mean, I can just imagining putting myself in their head, especially a young kid. I mean, one of
They
those
don't know
Hamas
better.
fighters, he could have also lost his sister, his young brother, his grandparents in a bombing. So there's just, oh man, it's just
It's
it's
a
just
lot.
so
It's,
bad.
yeah,
The
complex.
the cycle of violence. God, it can just make you do terrible things. But anyways,
Yeah,
continue
it's
what you're
it's
saying.
it's a very complex conflict that's perplexing on all sides, and even as spectators that we are, we're all perplexed by it. It's just so fucking complex, with a lot of hurt. This is a conflict with a lot of hurt and a lot of nastiness to it. It's just, that's why there's a division in like, who do you go for? But to me, it's like I said, it's not about rooting for anything. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of what happened, lay it
And
out there, and that's it.
also, let me just mention here because I was watching a documentary the other day about soldiers. It was just a random documentary about alcoholism and soldiers and stuff like that. And man, I forget what Fort Hood. They just renamed Fort Hood, but actually, that type of stuff even happens on our side.
Oh yeah,
One of the soldiers was like giving his, like, I guess, his PTSD. And one of the situations that he encountered is like, yeah, he broke into a house, he saw a woman, he saw a child, and he was just, I don't know. I guess he said that he was ordered to kill them, and he did. So it doesn't just happen. Like children getting, just killing kids like that doesn't just happen, in those guerrilla military groups like we were talking about. That
yeah.
those atrocities, whenever we had the Desert Storm and all that stuff, yeah, that probably happened often there
Oh
too.
yeah, yeah. And,
So,
and a lot of it doesn't get reported. There's because these are war crimes, and these are times that they're reporting on it. It's very hard to report. I mean, they're barely coming up with new grave sites recently in a documentary that some Palestinians were killed and their graves were found. It was called, I forgot the name, the Tarunta. It's a documentary you should watch where they interview IDF soldiers and they admit that it did occur. When the IDF for the longest kind of stay silent and try to keep it under the rug. That is a new documentary that recently came out, and they admit that it happened.
so,
We
so
executed them, shot them in the back of the head.
So I guess like in the end, man, like maybe like how you're saying like I don't know how to pick a side, or maybe there's just no moral high ground for either. It's just you just can't. It's not a question about picking. It's just they're both wrong. And
Right.
for the actions within war, maybe the big picture you can kind of like pick and choose like a side you agreed with, but whenever you take it down to the actual, down to the individual levels of each one of these soldiers and stuff like that, and consider what's going on in their head and what they've experienced, like from both sides, it's like
Yeah.
you can't pick or
Unfortunately,
choose.
unfortunately, the history. Who knows? Even if the British weren't involved, who knows that this was inevitable? Because this is the history of them being there historically, and then another group coming, and so it's all them trying to go back to it, and the British kind of helping it, and then the Holocaust, reinforcing it. So who knows? If it weren't for the British, would it still happen? We can't really. I mean, who else was in control? They want to pressure them. Who knows? It's just the way it played out. It just happened.
I-
The British were definitely a pivotal role that made it happen. The way it did, and with these agreements. So the blame on this would go on that initially, but then the fighting within the groups becomes internally whoever was involved, a conflict that unfortunately it's just the fault of situation with everyone involved, individual, and
I I guess something that, but I'm thinking here, like what you mentioned, that something that maybe we can agree on, obviously, is that giving the resources that we have in this world, given the what's the word, the quality of life that the
yeah,
Israelis have, there's no, and being in such close proximity to that quality of life, there's no reasons that the Palestinians have to have those third world issues that they're having, like with respect to, like, electricity, water, and all that stuff. It just doesn't make sense to me that that's just allowed to happen. You know what I mean? Like the folks
yeah,
there, because I mean that you're never going to get anywhere if you kind of, how we talked about in the very very beginning, like you're not gonna be able to kind of eliminate, like, I'm gonna call it extremism or radicalism and stuff like that, if the basic necessities are still not being addressed
right.
and
Yeah.
fixed
For the
and being
Palestinian people.
consistent for
and
the
and the
Palestinians.
history,
That's for sure.
unfortunately, the history of that region, with with British and the British Empire and all these this like control of the region definitely left that unstable. And then also the meddling of different empires in the United States and Iraq and all this trying to fund democracy and fund different groups, and then that leads to like different groups coming out of that. And it's just un- unfortunately the Arab world is like in such chaos because all these different groups have grown in civil war, and then the meddling doesn't help and whatnot, or who knows what started. I'm not too sure on the history of all that. It's way more complicated and there's more to it, but it's just they're not, in terms of like third world countries and and being able to grow and become more modern and that whatnot, have democracy or like technologies and all that. The
Yeah.
reason for it is just unfortunately all that shit that occurred, the meddling, the empires, fucking with shit, and then the
Uh,
groups
uh,
civil
you see,
war. And unfortunately it's not like the United States where we're like united in this sort of a way.
no,
It's just
but Damien, the thing is, though, is that I saw a documentary and they made like an interesting comparison, because there are regions in Gaza that they recorded, and they're like, you would actually, you wouldn't even know you're in Gaza watching this footage. There are people in Gaza that have a good quality of life. I mean,
Yeah.
right.
maybe they
I mean,
don't have
that's
all the
exactly.
guarantees that we do, but they definitely, like they were saying, like it's like I think they recorded like a high school graduation. They're like, you wouldn't think this high school graduation is there. Gaza also experiences what, the issues that we have throughout the world, where there's a big wealth disparity. There's a certain concentration of people that have all the freaking money there, and they're able
Yeah,
to provide
yeah,
all the things that they want. And then the rest of the world, the rest of the people, they live in these,
yeah,
really rough conditions.
yeah. And
So
that's
th-
everywhere.
and
And
those
we
and those that's internal. So they're able, if they get their act together, they can spread the love. But it seems like, internally they're still not doing that too. And you also mentioned that political cartoon, that leader of Hamas, he's always dressed really nice. He
yeah,
always, you can tell
yeah,
that he comes from. So it's that struggle that we have. And it's unfortunate that, like you can see it, people, you can easily call it out in that country, because not
yeah.
everyone
So the
is the
corruption,
same.
the civil unrest, the fighting with them, the different groups, the meddling. I mean, all of that is why they're not where they should be, and it's just extremist groups too, and that's a different. Like I said, that's something that requires its own study and research to really touch on, because who knows? So I hear there's funding from us and from other groups that fund different groups, and that's why there's some chaos in some places. I know with Iraq, I mean, that definitely was the case. You remember the weapons of mass destruction that we went to war with Saddam Hussein under Dick Cheney, the
Yeah.
most powerful vice president? Well, yeah. So it's like I can't really touch. I really can't talk on too much of the Arab world, but they're in turmoil. They're not where they should be because all that. I mean, but look at Saudi Arabia. I mean, the rest of Saudi. I feel like most of Saudi Arabia, I wonder how they are doing, but I know like the place where you have these like man-made islands. You have all the wealth going there.
I'm just when it comes to Gaza, I'm just still a little confused. It's like, I guess they're saying, yeah, they're oppressing us, oppressing us, oppressing us. But talk to like, maybe I need to do a little bit more research, but yeah, talk to the top 10% or top 1% of the
Right.
Gazans
That
over
would be
there,
anywhere.
and then and
That
then
would be
tell
anywhere.
them, is Israelis, are they oppressing them? It's kind of, I don't know. Maybe
No,
it's a
no,
scapegoat thing
no,
again. You know what I mean?
there's well documented, and like people, going there independently, asking the people in the streets what they think, and yeah, I would say like 80% agree that they feel occupied, and they agree that the settlements are wrong,
The settlements are wrong.
and how they want it, and how they want that fixed. That could be different. That's a different approach. Maybe that's not that different
But
ideas how to get there.
I'm not even talking about the settlements. I'm just talking about just the quality of life that the folks have. Like, it's just like there is a big difference
Oh, okay.
between like in Gaza specifically. Like I was telling you, they did a recording, and they were like, yeah, based on all this footage, you wouldn't even think you were in Gaza. Just how well these people. I guess it was like a graduation or something. I need to maybe share that with you
Yeah, I
guys.
saw that
What
video
you're
too,
talking
Joe.
about in different areas, the reason why some places are in different places in terms of the development, it's just the history. This is like kind of like new establishments compared to the United States. We were established like 200 years ago, and then them recently being established, and then also the wars and the fighting. So all that and the economy, and then the economy not getting there, going into war, or are they funding education? So there's a lot to it, and
There's just
explains
obviously
why
some people in
different places
Gaza
are
that
in
are
different,
that are benefiting a lot more than other folks. There's other
Yeah.
people. There's people in Gaza that have maybe a similar quality of life to Israelis. It seems, I don't know.
No,
Than,
but yeah,
than a
but
lot of than the majority of the
that is
population.
something that happens everywhere.
Muslim countries.
That's something that happens
That,
everywhere.
but dude, that's not a good thing. You know what I mean? It's just kind of,
Yeah.
it shows that there's an obvious problem. It happens everywhere, but it seems that some people can get the resources, and they're probably, and that's the thing. It's kind of like a balance. It's like, oh, well, I'm just gonna hog those resources. I'm not gonna spread them around. You know what I mean? I'm just gonna keep for me.
Unfortunately, that's a issue that it's worldwide, and it's just because it comes from a human quality of greed. So that's the issue that I think plagues all of us. Is just unfortunately, it's something that stems from like that was something that a human attribute that makes us good and makes us want to have more and improve. But at the same time, it's a double-edged sword. Like it's good to have it. But at the same time, it can create a demise and a corruption system because of the greed.
And that's what I'm saying, because like the main thing that I'm seeing in this whole conflict is obviously, like, whenever I'm viewing at it, Israelis have a certain quality of life and the Palestinians have this other one. And the majority of them, I mean, like I said, you can go into their cities and do the recording. It's not great. And then I guess the overall goal of society in general is to elevate the quality of life of humans across the board. But it always seems like, it's always concentrated to the few. And it seems that, there's some Gazans that can they're taking the opportunities. And I'm just wondering if, those are being afforded to all the other ones. And I don't know why there's this disparity there.
Yeah, I
Unless there's like corruption, like you're saying with Hamas. Like maybe they're, yeah, it's just kind of like, yeah, we're the government for the people, but no, for our families, we'll make sure that our families are okay. The rest of you guys, no. The rest, Israel's oppressing the rest of you guys. But so I'm not sure if that's the tune, if that's the reality of the situation. Because like me, like for some reason, I would expect that everyone would just have like kind of like a similar quality of life there, like kind of like in some African countries and stuff like that. It's just poverty across the board, you know what I mean? But although there's probably a small percentage again that are a little bit better, but no, like when I saw that video of the contrast between a certain part of Gaza and then the rest, there is a big difference.
Okay, all right, so I'm gonna go ahead and end it. This is a discussion that's not finished. It's halfway there, I think, maybe even less. There's so much more to learn. There's so much more research from my part that I want to do. Just for me to know and have, more background to be able to talk on this subject. Like I said, if at any point I might have sounded like I was pro Israeli or pro Palestinian or pro whatever, that's not what I'm just trying to come out with the facts, what happened, and what I'm learning, and just share that. And everyone, if anyone wants to, look further into it or give out information that contradicts what I've been saying, that's all good. I'm for that. My purpose is just to learn as much as I can about it and try to get to close to the bottom of it as I can. Although, unfortunately, I have to admit that this is a current war with two powers and other powers involved that, you're only going to know what you're allowed to know, basically. And this is like in foreign country with foreign languages, and the news is being restricted in some cases and lost. Not everything is being shown. I know there's censorship. There's history of that. So we're only going to know as much as we can know, and also so much information with so many micro, scenarios and involvement in so many individuals that, you can't say that one person or one group's action is, to be blamed on everyone else. It doesn't represent everyone. So there's so much of that going on here. There's so much to look into. You have to look at every case, even the small little massacres that occur, or the big ones, by what group, what individuals. There's so much, was that against the IDF? Was it for the IDF? There's so much to look at. And so stuff like that is just trying to get closer to the truth as much as we can, which at the end, it's probably not going to be close enough. But okay, I'll leave it with that. I'm going to go ahead and end the segment here. And until the next one, guys.